Hi, I'm Kristen Osenga. I'm professor of law at the University of Richmond School of Law. And today I'm going to unpack some of the issues surrounding patents covering COVID-19 vaccines and the recent news that the United States would support a waiver of those patents and other intellectual property related to COVID vaccines. So first things first, patents are one type of intellectual property that covers inventions, like vaccines. A patent gives the patent owner the right to exclude others from making, using, or selling the patented invention without the owner's permission for a limited period of time. And one of the reasons that the government grants patents is to give the inventor, or honestly, more often, the company that owns the patent, a period of time in which to recoup the expenses that are associated with developing the technology. The patent owner can recoup those expenses either by making and selling the invention himself or herself, or the technology can be licensed to other companies who can make and sell it. This period of exclusivity and the ability to recoup some expenses is important, especially in vaccine development. Vaccine development requires numerous stages, including multiple testing phases, before the vaccine will be approved for use. And this can take many, many years and millions of dollars. So in exchange for this period of exclusivity, the patent holder provides technological details on how to make and use the invention. Patents are published, the information is available to other innovators, and eventually the invention goes into the public domain, and this is a good trade-off. New technology, including vaccines, are often also covered by trade secret or know-how information. And so riffing off an analogy provided by Professor Ana Santos Richmond, you can think of patents like a recipe, providing a list of ingredients and steps. But most cooks know, some recipes just taste better if you use a certain brand of marshmallow, for example. So that certain brand, that extra tweak, a possibly hard to get ingredient, those things are not required for the patented invention to work, but they're not unimportant. In fact, they can be incredibly important. So what is up with the waiver? So on May 5th, the United States Trade Representative, Katherine Tai, announced that the United States would support a waiver of IP protections on COVID-19 vaccines to help end the pandemic. This idea of IP waivers is currently being discussed by the World Trade Organization, or WTO, after pleas by countries such as India and South Africa, as well as a number of commentators and organizations. Essentially, these entities have asked the WTO to issue a waiver so that countries would not be found in violation of TRIPS if they suspend enforcement of intellectual property. So TRIPS is an international intellectual property treaty that requires countries that are part of the agreement to provide and enforce a certain minimal level of intellectual property. And so the idea of the waiver is that countries who did not enforce intellectual property related to the COVID-19 vaccine would not found to be in violation of TRIPS, okay? So specifically, this would allow countries to grant compulsory licenses for COVID vaccines and more without facing the ire of other countries, okay? So compulsory licensing allows a country to authorize someone other than the patent owner to make and use a patented invention without the permission of the patent owner, basically overriding those exclusive rights that patent owners generally get. And compulsory licensing is permitted under TRIPS so long as the patent owner is provided adequate remuneration. But compulsory licensing is not universally appreciated. Since the 1980s, the United States has been rather vigorously opposed to compulsory licensing in other countries. So the fact that the U.S. Trade Representative has signaled support for a waiver is a significant shift in policy. And so, the desire behind the waiver is great, right? We want to get more vaccines in more places so that we end up having less COVID worldwide. But vaccine developers are not super excited about having their IP taken, and neither is the stock market. Stock prices for big pharma companies involved in vaccine development took a huge dip immediately after the United States announced support for the waiver. Additionally, the waiver is a little bit funny because a number of the major players in this space, such as Moderna, had already announced as early as last fall of 2020, that it would not enforce its patents during the pandemic. And so this waiver of patent rights in this case has been called by a number of commentators more symbolic than effective. And there's also a concern that this waiver could lead to further or additional weakening of IP rights more generally. And so we're in a really tricky space where patents on medical inventions are a big policy argument with strong arguments in favor of both sides. So compulsory licensing, as it's currently permitted by TRIPS, is largely limited to patents. The waiver that's being discussed would significantly increase the scope of compulsory licensing to also include trade secrets. And trade secrets are very important in helping a third party reproduce a vaccine manufacturing process. Now, of course, it's not easy to force a company to divulge its secret know-how. But even if that were to happen, even if we were to waive IP rights and get both patents and trade secrets, the waiver still may not be enough. So if our goal is to get a sufficient number of vaccines in a number of specific places, there are many issues that are not even addressed by the waiver. So for example, there are deficiencies in infrastructure. There's not enough manufacturing plants with the capabilities to do this. There's not enough distribution channels. And there's also limitations in the starting materials, or think about the inputs for recipes. The waiver of IP protection for COVID-19 vaccines may have the right goal in mind, but on its own is unlikely to get the desired outcome, and it actually may have some widespread negative impacts on pharmaceutical companies and innovation. And that's the story.